What's up guys, Acrylic Miniatures back with another video tutorial, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the fundamentals for painting in the Grimdark Style tutorial series. Just as a heads up guys, this is going to be primarily a discussion video, so I'm mostly just going to be talking for the next 30 minutes. This is going to be the intro to our fundamentals tutorial series for Grimdark painting. In the background I'm going to run some B-roll of like older videos, things like that while I'm just talking, and there'll be some slides in there that will help me illustrate what exactly I'm talking about. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to consider that the viewer of this video or this tutorial series is going to have a working knowledge of miniature painting already. So in the series, I'm going to be explaining how to paint Grimdark painting style specifically. I'm not going to be getting into the fundamentals of how to paint miniatures. So maybe you've been painting miniatures for a while already, or you've taken a break and you've come back, and you kind of want to try a different approach this time. Maybe you're not too thrilled about the box art for Games Workshop models, very bright, colorful, very clean, and you want to try something that is a little bit more representative of the grim darkness of the far future. So I'm going to try to break that down for you from a very fundamental standpoint and tell you everything that you need to know to start painting in that style. I'll also talk about what the Grimdark painting style is, at least from my perspective, and some of the key differences compared to the more popular style or traditional style of miniature painting. Like I said, we're going to be talking about a lot of products and the differences between these types of products we're going to be using. And one of the biggest things I want to talk about in this video is going to be the solvents, thinners, and the misconceptions about those products. Just to kind of explain that a little bit, I use a product called mineral spirits quite often. It's an oil-based, kind of like a turpentine product. It's used as a cleaner, thinner for oil-based products. And a lot of people think that it dissolves acrylic paint, which is just simply not true. So we're going to talk about it. I'm going to give you everything you need to know about how to paint in the Grimdark style. And like I was saying, in this video, we're going to talk mainly about those solvents and thinners, because that's one of the most important things you need to know about when you get into the style. We're using different types of products to get this weathering and this grimdark effect. They're primarily enamel-based and oil-based products, which is different from acrylic paints. So they have different types of thinner, and they work a lot different than acrylics, but they're very easy to use. The Grimdark painting style, at least the techniques that I've developed, is a very low-skill painting style. You do not have to be a master to paint like this. It's very product-centric, and it doesn't require you buying hundreds and hundreds of different types of paints or anything like that. There's just a few products that I like to use that can really transform your miniatures into just a more grimdark style. So what is the Grimdark style? I think the most simple answer to that is that it's just a much more dark and gritty type of miniature or painting style, as opposed to what you would find on a Games Workshop box art. It attempts to more accurately capture the mood and feel of what I believe is the general consensus of what most people think the grim darkness of the far future would actually look like in reality. So the style originated from Lawrence Blanche. This is a fellow that does heavily converted miniatures, and he also paints in a very dark and kind of gritty style. I can't really speak too much about how he paints or the techniques that he uses. I really have no idea how he paints, and I'm sure a lot of people in the community that paint in a Grimdark style use a very wide array of different styles and everything like that. So Lawrence Blanche also did a lot of conversion, heavily converted miniatures, and converting miniatures is something that comes up a lot when you talk about Grimdark, the Grimdark style, but it's not a skill that's required. So all the painting techniques that we'll talk about as we get into this, and all the information you're going to learn can be used on the miniature right out of the box, built as intended. Before we get into talking about products specifically, we're first going to take a look at a side-by-side comparison of the Belisarius Call model. One being painted by the Games Workshop team. This is going to be the box art. And then the other one is painted by myself into a more Grimdark style. So if we start at the very bottom of things, so if we start at the very first steps of base coating, the base coats are pretty much going to be applied in a very similar fashion. So the red on the cloak of the Grimdark example is going to be much darker in the end, but when we come on to the model with it initially, it's probably going to look about the same color as what you see on the Games Workshop example. So the reason it gets so much darker and grittier is just some of the finishing techniques that we use using specific products. Also, you'll probably notice that the contrast of the Grimdark example is a little bit higher, so we have darker darks and lighter lights, and that's one of the key elements to the Grimdark style, in my opinion, is controlling the contrast and really pushing shadows and light. Another thing is you'll notice a lack of detail or edge highlighting, that kind of thing, on the Grimdark example. On the Games Workshop example, almost every detail on the model will be edge highlight, so you'll go in, base, color it, wash it, and then edge highlight it. That's usually the general approach. When we're doing this from a Grimdark standpoint, there's a lot of times when we just skip over details completely. We don't really go in and edge highlight too much of anything. We're more worried about the overall look of the model as opposed to the precision of detail on every aspect of the model. So there's a lot of details here that just get base colored and washed, and there's no highlighting whatsoever, and specifically no edge highlighting most of the times. I usually never edge highlight anything. I think that adds a bit too much stylization. Gives it that kind of cartoony look to it, so I tried to avoid doing that technique when I'm painting Grimdark. Other than that, you're going to notice that the miniature is the colors are a lot darker, a lot more desaturated. That's very intentional. We're muting a lot of things. We want things to look very drab, kind of oppressed looking, very dirty. And then one of the main things that we do to give interest to the model is the contrast that I was talking about before. And then everything for the Grimdark example is going to be pretty heavily weathered in comparison. So we're doing lots of dirt, lots of grime, patinas, that kind of thing. We can also do lots of chipping. You'll find chipping very often in the Grimdark style, very heavily damaged things, things that look battle damaged or just very old in disrepair, that sort of thing. So this is the kind of thing that we're going for over the Games Workshop box art style. So we're just trying to make things look a lot darker and a lot grittier. So I guess the question is, how do we go from the Games Workshop style to a much more dark and gritty Grimdark style of painting? The answer to that is going to be very specific products that we use to finish the model. Now, I mentioned before that the techniques that I've developed are very product-centric. They do not require a lot of skill. You can get a lot of nuance to your painting as you get used to using them and your control becomes a little bit better. But for the most part, we're using a very simple application and reductive technique to add and remove enamel washes or oil washes off of the model. So when we start painting our miniature, we approach it much like how you would painting in the Games Workshop style. We just go in and base the model out very cleanly. We want to try to get everything based out nice and neat, just like you would when you're painting in the Games Workshop style. But after that point, instead of going in with acrylic washes and acrylic highlights and that sort of thing, we're just going to go in and we're going to swap over to those enamel products. So one of the best products that I'll talk about a lot, and is probably, if you if you only pick up one product that I recommend out of this whole video tutorial series, it's going to have to be the streaking grime from AK Interactive. Now, this is the easiest wash to kind of get your miniatures into that grimdark realm of feel. So I've done a video on this already, and that video is on YouTube. And the simplest approach, like the tabletop standard version of Grimdark Style, would be to base coat your miniature, whatever colors you would like, and then apply the streaking grime. And we'll talk about application and stuff like that in more depth later on, but you apply this enamel product, and then you go back and you remove it back off, and you leave it in the crevices and that sort of thing. And you also use the coloration of it to kind of dirty up your model, tone it down. It tones down the saturation, does a lot in just one step. So we're going to be using lots of enamels and oils also. So all the enamels that I'm going to be talking about in the series are going to be from the AK Interactive weathering line. And then we're also going to be talking a lot about oil paints. So oil paints are going to be from Absalom 502. And a very important note about the oil paints is going to be that I would have to highly suggest that you pick up the Absalom 502 paints over Winsor Newton Artist Oil. So if you pick up any type of oil paint, do yourself a favor and use the Absalom 502. To my knowledge, it's the only oil that is designed specifically for miniature painting. Winsor Newton Artist Oils are designed to paint on canvas, so they have a whole lot of linseed oil in them, and a linseed oil is going to slow down the drying process of a pigment. So the more linseed oil that is in the pigment, the longer it's going to take to dry. So the difference between Absalom 502 and Winsor Newton is just that Absalom has a lot less linseed oil, and so they're going to be much more manageable from a drying standpoint. All right, so that brings me to the main focus of this video. The biggest thing I want to talk about, the most important little fact that you need to know when you start painting Grimdark is the different types of solvents and thinners that we use. So up to this point, painting in the Games Workshop style, you've used acrylic, and to thin that, you've probably used water, or maybe used flow improver or a glaze medium or something like that. But for the most part, you've been working with water only to thin your paints. So enamels and oil paints are much different in the fact that they have a different type of base. So in acrylic paint, you have basically a water base, and then you have the pigment. And then in enamel and oil paints, you have a much different type of base, and these two bases do not mix with acrylics very well. As I'd mentioned before, a lot of people think that using mineral spirits or oil-based paints over top of acrylics is just not something you can do. I've heard that a lot. People are kind of confused about the whole process and how that works. So I'm going to try to explain in layman's terms just how all that works. So as we had talked before, we base our miniatures out in acrylic paints, just like you always do. And a lot of times we will go back over top of our weathering and stuff like that with acrylic, but we'll get more into that. So we have our acrylic base, and acrylic is water-based, and we're looking to go over top of this with an oil-based product, and we know that oil and water do not mix. But the thing about acrylics is that when it dries, it turns into a plastic polymer, which becomes impermeable to water at that point. So it kind of just changes into a plastic once it's dried. So the most important thing that you can do when you're going to be going back in with oils and enamels is you build up your base coats very evenly, and they need to be 100% solid. So like I was saying, some people think that mineral spirits dissolves acrylic. But that is not what is happening when you're, if you've ever tried using these techniques, you go in and you apply an enamel wash and you try to remove it with a Q-tip, and your acrylic paint just comes right off the model. So that kind of thing will happen a lot early on, but hopefully I can clarify some things and kind of help you understand why that's happening. So the main reason for that happening is going to be that, one, your base colors are not even enough, or there is a breach in them. Maybe you apply them too thinly, and the mineral spirit is allowed to work up underneath the plastic. So once your acrylics dry, they turn into a plastic and they adhere to the model. If there's any kind of breach in the paint, it's applied too thinly, or if you're removing enamel with a Q-tip and you rub too hard and you kind of create a little hole, or you knock a little bit off, that allows mineral spirits up underneath the acrylic. So it's not dissolving the acrylic and it's not affecting it on a chemical level at all. It's just getting underneath it, and it basically acts as a lubricant, and then your acrylic paint will easily just slide right off the model. Okay, so another reason this can be happening is that you're not letting your acrylics fully cure. So it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for a properly applied base color to cure out dry. So you want to let all your base colors, any of your acrylic work that you do in the beginning, you've got to make sure that those are completely cure before you go on with mineral spirits. If they're not, then the mineral spirits is once again allowed to work up underneath it, and it's going to act as a lubricant, and your paint is just going to slide right off the model. So one of the terms you're going to need to become familiar with is going to be miscible, the miscibility of two liquids. So miscible means the forming of a homogeneous mixture when added together. So that means if you add two liquids together, do they mix or do they kind of separate, like oil and water? So this is going to be important to know when you're trying to mix your paints together or thin certain types of paints out. Like I was saying, most of the time we're going to be using enamels and oils, which we can use mineral spirits to thin down both of those. Or sometimes we'll also be using an alcohol-based product, which we'll be using alcohol to thin that down. Isopropyl 99% alcohol is what we'll be using. So kind of an important fact about that is isopropyl alcohol is miscible with both mineral spirits and water, but water is not miscible with mineral spirits. So that's one of the main things that you'll need to know about mixing all these solvents together, stuff like that. It's just kind of what's going to mix together and what's not. So the best thing about acrylics, as I was saying, is that yes, they are water-based, but once they dry, they're going to turn into a plastic polymer. So that's going to be impermeable to water, and if applied correctly, will allow us to go over top of these with any other type of medium that we want to go over top of it with, without running the risk of damaging the paint. So with mineral spirits, we also want to know if we can paint over top of that with an acrylic. The answer to that is yes, you can. What you will need to let the mineral spirits cure, just like you would the acrylic. So you're not going to have any issues as so long as everything you're allowing dry times between steps. And the dry times for mineral spirits is not very long. You can even blow dry it dry, and it dries very rapidly, especially when mixed with enamels. So enamels, between enamels and oils, enamels are going to be the product that rapidly cures out, and oils are going to take a lot longer. So when we wash a model and we clean it with mineral spirits, we need to make sure it's dry, and then once it's dry, we can indeed go back over it and paint over it with just acrylics straight onto it. Some people like to do a clear coat over that. I personally do not. I think it kind of ruins the finish of the enamel. The enamel paint has a very distinct finish that gives your model a certain look, and I don't really like losing that effect. So I just simply am patient, wait for it to dry, or either blow it dry, and then we're free to go back over it. If you try to go over the mineral spirit with an acrylic and the mineral spirit is still wet, you'll notice that your paint kind of beads up. It doesn't flow off the brush. You can't really get it to flow into the model correctly. It just kind of beads up. That just means that your mineral spirits has not dried, or you've kind of left an oily residue on there, and maybe the enamels haven't fully cured out yet. Some of the other solvents that we're going to be using is a lacquer thinner, and this is simply used to clean up our brushes and also our tools, like our airbrush when we are using that. I like to use lacquer thinner. It breaks down paints. It's like mineral spirits is much more like a thinner. Lacquer thinner is like much more like a solvent, so it kind of dissolves paint, whether it be enamels, oils, or acrylics. So it dissolves them away, softens them up, and allows you to clean them off of your tools. Lacquer thinner can sometimes mess up the glue on your ferrules of your brush if you're not careful, or if it's kind of a cheaper brush. I've never really had an issue cleaning my Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes with it. The ferrules never come off or get loosened by the lacquer thinner. But on cheaper brushes, sometimes it can kind of dissolve that cheaper kind of glue and the ferrule will come off. But easy fix is just to glue it back on. So we're using that lacquer thinner just to clean our brushes. If we're using acrylic to paint with on our brush, we'll wash it out with water first. If we're using oils or enamels, we'll wash away those pigments with mineral spirits first, and then finish at the end of the day or something like that. When we're done working, we'll wash them out with lacquer thinner. The other thing that I use for a thinner is just water, distilled water. I know a lot of people like to use all these kind of fancier thinners like Flow Improver or Vallejo's airbrush thinner, that kind of thing to thin your paints down. The only thing that I could possibly recommend other than water would be a glaze medium. A glaze medium is going to be probably the best thing that you can use to thin down your acrylic paints when you're working with a brush and you're trying to get like filter effects or glazing effects. But when we're just mixing down like a general mix down of acrylics, maybe to put in an airbrush or something like that, distilled water is perfectly fine. With tap water, you'll run the risk of getting minerals and stuff like that in there, and you can get little texture on your model. I'm not opposed to getting textures on your models. I think a lot of times I'll add textures to models very intentionally. So using tap water for me is not the biggest of issue, but if you want a very clean and smooth base color applied with an airbrush, use distilled water to thin that down. And in most cases, when you're just thinning down to base color something with a brush, distilled water is all you need. You really don't need all these other products to thin your paints down unless you're trying to do like glazing, and then I would recommend like a pretty good quality glaze medium. Other than that, that's going to pretty much be all the different types of solvents we use. So we use isopropyl alcohol 99 for alcohol-based products. And as a reminder, that is miscible with mineral spirits, lacquer thinner, and water. So if you mix alcohol and all three of those other substances, that'll make one homogeneous liquid. The other one that we use is mineral spirits. This is pretty much going to be used to thin down and clean up enamels and oils, and that's not going to be miscible with water, but it is with alcohol. So other than that, it's just going to be water for thinning down acrylics or inks, or thinning down for spraying acrylics through an airbrush, and then finally we have the lacquer thinner for cleaning up our tools. Alright, so before I end the video here, I'm going to give one last little note. A lot of people ask me what kind of acrylic paints do I use. Pretty much anything that you want. I have Citadel paints and Vallejo and all the other brands. You know, I've tried multiple ones. They all pretty much the same to me. With that said, I do kind of prefer Vallejo Model Air, just for the sole reason of just kind of the color palette that range of paint offers, and they're a little bit kind of desaturated looking. A lot of like World War I, World War II colors in there that I think kind of just works good in the palettes that I like to create for Grimdark painting. But if you have Citadel, I use Citadel all the time. You know, usually when I'm picking out a red, you know, the decision comes down to whatever's closest to my hand. You know, it's not really, you know, I'm not very specific about what red it is. It's just, you know, whatever's closest, I'll grab it. You know, I have a couple colors that are my favorite colors, like Evil Sun Scarlet's my favorite red. that sort of thing. But for acrylic paints, whatever you have is going to work. And I do want to mention that in the description of this video, I'm going to have two links to Amazon. One is for the .uk and the other one's going to be the .com. If you want to see all of the tools and types of products I do have a running list on there. The list is not complete. It takes a long time to build those like recommendation links and stuff like that. All those lists. It just takes a while to find the products, but I have a lot of things on there, and you can kind of see some of the things that I just have in my studio when I'm painting and stuff like that. I think everything is on there except for like the acrylics and just some other like terrain and stuff like that. There's some products that I use frequently that I haven't put on there yet, but for the most part, like all the AK stuff and some of the oils and all the solvents. Most importantly, the enamels and the solvents are going to be on there, and then some of the tools to work with those, like Q-tips and wool daubers and dram cups, that kind of thing. That's going to be on that list. I'll keep adding to it as I work on the series, and we kind of talk about different products, and I get into specifics about each type of product. So check those two links out if you want to check out everything that I recommend personally. But other than that, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. In the next one, we're going to talk about AK Interactive products specifically, and kind of the main things you need to know about using them. I've gone over AK Interactive products several times, probably in almost every video, but I'm just going to go back over it one more time just for the sake of this fundamentals video, because they're probably some of the most important products that we're going to be using to achieve a Grimdark style. It's just that enamel type paint just does such a good job at getting us there and getting us in the realm of dark and gritty. So we'll go over that one more time, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.